Hello and welcome to another episode of Valley Sports Telegram presents the Sports Telegram. Today we're doing the second half of our Major League Baseball quarter poll wrap up. If you missed the American League One, take a look. We'll be right there. Some interesting stuff, and might have the best division in all of baseball in a long time. So check that one out. But yeah, today we're doing the National League. There are a couple of interesting storylines that we're following. Kenny's Mets are hanging tough. I'm not quite sure if the Dodgers are legit, and I can't believe I just said that. And it looks like we have two very weak central divisions in baseball. And we will be going in depth on all those divisions. Kenny, how you doing?
I mean, I'm doing all right. I mean, considering the Mets are up and down, it's been a rough start to the year. But you know what? Any day that has baseball is a great day. So, I'm just excited. Let's tear right into this thing and look at where some of these teams are as we inch closer and closer to Memorial Day. Because the old adage is Memorial Day is the first part of the season where you sort of check the oil on teams and you start to get a real feel for who these teams are and what they're going to be able to do and what they may need to start looking at as the trade deadline really starts to fastly approach and the All-Star break. So it's going to be exciting. So let's dig right into it.
All right. And I'm going to start with the Central because when you look at it at first glance, it's very disappointing, right? Milwaukee's 25-22. Pittsburgh is half a game back at 25-23. St. Louis is 6 games under 500. Chicago's 6 games under 500. And Cincinnati is 8. They're all jumbled right there. But then you take another look, and St. Louis, 6 games under at 22-28. But they're 7-3 in their last 10. And they played the Dodgers tough over the weekend and earned a split. So that's good for Cardinals fans. They played the Dodgers tough, came away with a split. They're kind of still in the mix. I think they're only 3.5 games back, 4 games back. And then we'll work our way up. Pittsburgh is doing okay. They had that hot start. But they're 4-6 in their last 10. So don't really know kind of if they're going to be able to turn that around. It's a really, really young team. They have some exciting pieces. But again, I don't really know if there's enough there. And Milwaukee is 25-22. They're 5-5 in their last 10. And they are the only division leader in all of baseball with a negative run differential, which means I don't think they're holding on to that spot. They only got a half a game on Pittsburgh. St. Louis is coming up quick. I think Milwaukee fades as they go further, and the Pirates and Cardinals battle it out for the division.
I don't know if I'm there with you on that one, only because when I look at a team like Milwaukee, we knew coming into the year that was my thought was that Milwaukee would probably be the best team because quite frankly, they've got the best pitcher in the division. And Corbin Burns has been one of the best pitchers in baseball the last few years, and he sort of lived up to that at the start of the year. The problem with them is this was always going to be a year where they were going to lean on that pitching staff to sort of kind of carry them through the year, and already 2/5 of that rotation is on the DL right now. So they're sort of in the same sort of situation as my team that we'll get into later, where they're sort of piecing it together and they don't really score enough to really be to struggle with fill-ins, kind of trying to be placeholders in your staff. So I think that sort of has led to why they've looked great at times then not look so great at times in the beginning of the year. Now, the team that's intriguing is, like you were talking about, with St. Louis, who looked a lot better than their record would say that they are when they played against the Dodgers this past weekend. And I do think that ultimately they are going to emerge as probably the top challenger to Milwaukee to take that division from them. I think it's going to be a 2-horse race between those two teams. The Cubbies are just kind of sort of in between. Yeah, they've got some players to be excited about, and like Happ and Dansby Swanson has looked okay since he's came here as a free agent in the offseason. But they're not going to be serious contenders. We know the Reds are not going to seriously contend, even though I love those City Connect uniforms. They debuted last week. But the Pirates are an intriguing team because, again, when you talk about teams like Tampa, or we talk about teams like Toronto the last 2 years, and a team like Baltimore right now, you see the pieces of something coming together with some of their exciting young talent. Jack Zawinski is one of a fun young player to watch for them. But is this sustainable? I don't know, because I assumed that when O'Neal Cruz, who was supposed to take a big leap for that team and be the reason why they may have made some noise or ruffled some feathers in the Central Division, he broke his ankle on that ugly play in the beginning of the year. I thought they'd go in the tank, and somehow they got better, or they've maintained it. So I don't know. I don't know ultimately if the Pirates will be able to stay in it. I don't think so. I think they'll be one of those teams like we saw with Baltimore like last year, where they might be able to stay in it and then they'll fade down the stretch like young teams that aren't really ready to compete tend to do. But I do think St. Louis is going to shake off that start, because when you have Arenado and Goldschmidt in the middle of your lineup, once those sleeping giants sort of awaken, and we're talking about a guy in Goldschmidt who's the defending NL MVP, I think ultimately they just haven't looked as good as what they're going to look. I would expect the Jordan Walker kid to make his way back to the majors and be a contributor for them going into the summer. So I think the Cardinals are probably the biggest challenger to the Brewers, but I think it's Cardinals Brewers battling it out for that Central Division.
I mean, the consistency issues kind of in Milwaukee on offense, it really kind of hurts them. The thing I like about Pittsburgh is McCutchen is having almost like a turn back the clock year. He's not hitting the way he used to hit, but he's consistent. He's carrying enough. I think his presence in that locker room is speaking wonders, because he's been around. The guy's a living legend in Pittsburgh. I think with him, they might be able to hold it. It kind of depends on health in Milwaukee, if you're asking me. St. Louis, like I said, they I think not only challenge, they might be the one to walk away with the crown at the end of the season. And if you want to rebut, I'll give you a chance to rebut, but I do want to slide into the NL East. So out east, Atlanta is kind of sitting pretty. I mean, they haven't had a really good last stretch of games, but they're 29-18, 4-6 in their last 10. Your Mets, 25-23, they're holding on. But they're 7-3. So you guys have had a good stretch of runs beating up on some teams. Miami's holding on at 500, 24-24. Probably happy about Philly being 4 games under and Trey Turner just playing like hot garbage. And Washington's bringing up, the rear. Like we said in the last one, they might be getting ready to offload some pieces over the next, they'll probably start planning to offload pieces in the next 30 days or so. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we knew coming into the year, we expected the Mets to challenge for that division because of, if for no other reason, just the sheer amount of money that has been spent on this roster. But what's interesting when you look at the Mets, and I'm skipping straight to the Mets because we know what the Braves are. That rotation is stacked. Ronald Acuna Jr., whatever vestiges of issues that he may have had with his knee, they're gone, and he is in the midst of he is on a historic tear in terms of what he's doing on the base paths with the bat in his hand. He's playing a sparkling outfield. Like the Braves are the Braves. Like you saw him the last few days. Like there is no real weaknesses there with that team. Maybe the bullpen, maybe that's the one area they may try to shore up as the summer goes along, looking for pieces to kind of to try to hold off a team like the Mets and the Phillies. But the Mets are probably the most intriguing team in that division right now because there's sort of a crossroads that's happening with the New York Mets. Like we talked about off air, where they've got some really exciting young prospects that are sort of fighting their way onto that roster. And the ones who have started to get playing time are starting to contribute. Like, for instance, the Mets have a real issue right now because they brought up that young catcher, Francisco Alvarez, who was tearing the cover off the ball. But they've got 3 other catchers, including Omar Narvaez, who they brought in the offseason. We had Tomas Nido. We took a flyer on Gary Sanchez, brought him up. Now we got 4 catchers. No one needs 4 catchers on the roster. But any of the other 3 outside of Alvarez, if you DFA him, you're probably going to lose him. Gary Sanchez has shown enough where he'd get picked up by somebody. Tomas Nido would get picked up. Narvaez is a decent hitting catcher. So you're going to lose whoever you try to DFA. They're not going to make it to the minors. Someone will pick them up. So conventional wisdom would say, oh, send the young guy down. But we're already hearing in that Mets locker room that if they try to even attempt to take this guy off the roster, there'll be a full-fledged revolt in that locker room because of how he's already ingratiated himself and he's revered by that team and the juice that he sort of gave that offense because we were struggling. And then you talk about Brett Beatty now taking that job from Escobar at third, and Mark Vientos, who was hitting bombs all over the place in the minors, came straight up, started doing it. And that's not even talking about Ronnie Mauricio, who reminds me of an Alfonso Soriano clone. We can't even bring him up because there's no place to play him. So the Mets have these money they've been tied up in the guys, but the future is really bright. So I'm not tripping. The team that I'm worried about is those damn Phillies. Because, yes, Trey Turner's look like trash, and they haven't played well. Bryce is still sort of working his way back with the elbow. But we've seen this movie before, right? We saw them look terrible in the regular season last year, and then they got into the postseason, and you realize, oh, shit, this roster is built for the postseason. So for them, it's going to be about treading water, because if they can get there in the end, now you got Trey Turner wreaking havoc on the bases in the postseason to go along with all those mashers they have in the lineup. So the team that I look at and I'm like, I don't know if it's sustainable with the Marlins because Sandy Alcantara hasn't looked the same this year. I don't know how they're doing it with smoke and mirrors, but it really is a 3-horse race. I don't know if there's anybody that's going to be able to catch the Braves. I expect the Braves to be challenging for that number 1 spot in the East, but it's going to be fun to see how it unfolds.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the current standings, you know, there's a battle in the wild card brewing. You know, your Mets are pretty solid in that, you know, in that number 2 spot in the wild card, but if they can piece together and hearing that about these kids already kind of, you know, staking the claim in the locker room, and not by, you know, being bodacious and just out there and puffing their chest and I belong. No, it's the team has taken those stakes and hammered it home and been like, no, they belong.
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually an encouraging sign for this team. And it could be kind of a rallying cry getting in the summer now when, hey, you got to figure something out come July. Maybe
And I also got to give a little bit of love to what Pete Alonso's doing at the start of this year, because boy, is this guy becoming the scariest slugger in the game, with the ability to hit a ball 450 feet every time he swings the bat. Like I said, last year, he had an MVP-esque type season, but what Paul Goldschmidt did just sort of dwarfed everyone. But he's making a statement that last year wasn't a fluke. What he's done on the major league level is not a fluke, and he is maybe the most dangerous power hitter in the sport.
He is one of my favorite non-Dodgers to watch. Just since he jumped on the scene, he's been one of my favorites. But yeah, the East it looks competitive. Yeah, I don't really think Atlanta's going to fall apart. But I mean, hey, if you're battling for a wild card spot, at least you got a chance to get in and make some noise and stay away from Atlanta until the CS.
Yeah. Because and that's the thing, right? Because when you look at how the format has changed, that's why I'm not in full panic, despite the fact that we've floated around 500, and for some reason we can't beat the Nationals. I'm not really understanding what that's all about. But you're not panicking because you know there are 3 wild card spots, and when I look at the landscape of the National League, I don't think there are a ton of teams over the course of a season are going to be better than us. We need Scherzer to kind of rediscover his form a little bit, and hopefully Justin Verlander can stay healthy, because that 1-2 at the top of the lineup will help us win a lot of games. We got to figure out what we're doing behind them in the rotation, but the Mets should be fine. And honestly, the Phillies probably need to figure out a way to get another pitcher to go with Nola at the top of their rotation. That will help them a little bit too. But yeah, those 3 teams at the top of the East, they all should be there in the playoffs by the time we get to the All-Star break. We should be talking about those 3 teams all sort of kind of establishing a foothold as being like top contenders to get to the series.
I mean, from the quarter pole, if we go from quarter pole to halfway, that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
Right around 4th of July when we do another one of these kind of quick recaps. That takes us into the NL West. Dodgers are 31-19. You got to adjust the Braves from the other one. They're 29-19. So yeah, Dodgers 31-19, beat up on the Braves pretty good. Arizona is right there, couple games back. San Francisco is hovering around 500 for whatever reason. They're still hovering. 29-20 for Arizona, 500, 24-24 for San Francisco. The Padres, as much as it makes me very giddy, I think now, currently, this is a team I hate more than the Giants. They're 4 games under 500, and the Rockies are the Rockies, 21-28, 7 under. Just can't put it together. This is kind of epitome of the Rockies. They seem like they're going to be good, and then they're just not. And they're not good for so many years. Then all of a sudden they put it together for like 2-3 years. And you think, oh, maybe they can sustain a run, and then they fall apart. Is it because people don't want to pitch in Colorado? Is it because people don't want to play at altitude? I don't understand. It's not. It feels to me like it wasn't too long ago that they were at the top of the division with the Dodgers. It might be like 6 years ago at this point. I don't. But they've been bottom feeding in the West for a while. San Diego, and I said this to you off camera, is what happens when you try to buy a team instead of building a team. There's no cohesion in that locker room. You can't tell me there is. I refuse to believe there is any, because I don't see it. And I'll go back to the crying Kershaw and the fact that from the moment they put that up in San Diego a few weeks ago, they lost to the Dodgers. The next 5 games, they played the Dodgers, and I think they finished something like 1-8 over the next 10 or something. They're 2-8 right now over their last 10. San Francisco, you kind of touched on it when we did the AL, or we were offline. They got a lot of money. They got money to throw around. What are they going to do? And then the D-backs are the surprise to me. I thought they were a year away. I didn't think they were quite there. But they're coming up pretty strong. They're 8-2 in their last 10 and just putting it together. So it's going to be interesting. I'll go in depth on what I think about these not real Dodgers in a minute. But I want to get your take on the West.
From the bottom. My issue with Colorado, and it was the thing that really bothered me at the time when they signed Chris Bryant, was I don't understand what the direction of your organization is, or what the philosophy of your organization is, when you know what the difficulties have been in terms of them being able to sustain winning for long periods of time. I look at what the Rockies have in terms of natural advantages, playing at elevation, how that ball travels, the sheer size of that ballpark. It's massive. This is a team that they should have been from the beginning. Even in terms of the players that you target to draft and try to develop, you should be trying to develop pitchers who are ground ball pitchers. You should be drafting for speed and defense in that ballpark, because everybody's going to hit home runs there. Like, the ball's going to fly out. You don't need to invest in sluggers. You need to invest in guys who can make contact, put the bat on the ball, get on the bases, wreak havoc, and invest in building a great defensive team, because that's what's going to win in Colorado. You take defense on the road, and defense will help you. And when you get into these rough patches at home, when teams come in who can hit the ball, so they're sort of a mess. There's some things in Colorado that just sort of need to change. I agree with you on what you were talking about in terms of San Diego. The cohesion's not there, because when you come in and you spend a bunch of money we've seen it. We saw the Marlins do it famously, like in 2011 or 2012, when they threw a bunch of money at players and it just didn't work. A lot of times it's rare when you see that happen, where that sort of thing works. The difference between them, because I know Padres fans will look at me as I'm wearing this Mets hat like, oh, you want to talk. But the difference is, an owner came into place and saw Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil and saw what was coming in the farm system and said, we need to build on top of that. We can accelerate this curve by adding in a Scherzer and adding in a couple of pieces at the top of the rotation and bringing in a guy like Marte. Because we bought those players, but we didn't spend overpay for those guys. We just had an owner who opened his pockets and said, how can we build on what that foundation is that we already have here? Well, how can we add to it? Right? San Diego kind of is taking the opposite approach. Trade away all these prospects. They traded away a ton of prospects that are helping the Nationals sort of rebuild now to go get Soto. And you don't know if you're going to have him beyond 2 years. You traded away young pitchers. You traded away what could have started beating your core, right? To add all these pieces, and we don't know if it's going to work. Also, like you said, there's probably a chemistry issue there. We know about the sort of strained relationship that existed between like Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado. We saw that play out in real time at several points. So there seems to be something there that's keeping them from really challenging the Dodgers. San Francisco, there's not much to talk about there. Someone please come take their money, because that roster, yes, they should be around 20. They should be around 500 because that's as mid a roster as you're going to find in the sport right now. Arizona is interesting because when you look at some of the things that they did in the offseason, yeah, that they may have accelerated their curve because an underrated move is bringing in Lourdes Gurriel. Corbin Carroll is sort of ahead of where you thought he was going to be. Ketel Marte, we know what he was. He was their perennial all-star. Christian Walker's a very good player for him. Pavin Smith has been a pretty decent player for him. So yeah, maybe they can do this all year long. I mean, time will tell, but they're definitely off to a surprising start from where a lot of people thought they might be at this point in the year. And with the Dodgers, yes, we don't know if they're real or not, but I think a lot of that has to do with there's just big question marks in areas that normally haven't been in the last few years for the Dodgers. Now Urias is a little banged up, and he's on the DL. Dustin May, they were expecting him to take a big step forward for them and sort of start to show himself to be a top of the rotation guy, and now we're worried that we might have to use the dreaded Tommy John word with whatever's going on with him. So now you got Noah Syndergaard in an elevated position when he was never supposed to be more than a fourth or fifth starter for this team. Luckily, they just got Gonsolin back. So hopefully he can sort of regain that form he discovered last year. It's just there you look at this Dodgers roster, yes, they're still talented, but all of a sudden there's some holes there of where you're just not sure of what they have or if it's going to be sustainable to compete with the Braves of the world in the National League.
Yeah, exactly. But in the rotation, the Dodgers have been doing this going back a couple of years when they're going to bring up somebody. They keep their best starters at Double-A.
Yeah,
they don't send them to Triple-A. Why? Because the PCL is wonky.
Yeah,
they're playing at weird altitudes. They've got these random ass parks.
Yeah,
so they keep them in Oklahoma City.
Mhm.
I don't need you to go to Triple-A. No. You're too good for Triple-A. Can you imagine that? I'm going to keep you in Double-A because you're too good for Triple-A.
Yeah.
But they do that, and lo and behold, they call up Bobby Miller, and he got the big win yesterday. MLB debut, walked away with the win. So I trust the farm system, right, to come up and fill some holes. Is Bobby Miller ready to be a number 3 starter for this team right now? I don't know. Gonsolin's back. What you have is you've got Kershaw, who, as long as he's healthy, is one of the best. Gonsolin has proven to be really, really good. Losing May hurts. Urias, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. So it's kind of a patchwork starting rotation right now. But their bullpen's been surprisingly okay. I mean, I can't say they've been super solid. And if they haven't been super solid, then they've just been good enough to not lose them a lot of games, which is kind of all you can ask for when you don't have a shutdown pen. The lineup has been getting better, right? Muncy was terrible to start. Now he's number 2 in baseball in home runs, right? Freddie Freeman's Mr. Consistency. Never had an issue with him.
Yeah, I hate that guy.
You don't have to hate him anymore. Mookie's power isn't quite there, right? But he's still very, very consistent. And as long as Mookie is consistently, kind of hitting the ball, he doesn't need to be hitting home runs, right? Even though they pay him very handsomely. But what did he say famously? And we mentioned it in our previous one. They just pay him to play wherever they pay him to play. He plays. They pay him for right field, but he'll play where they want him to. And the bat plays. So, and Will Smith is the best hitting catcher in all of baseball. So what is that? We just named off 5 positions in a starting lineup, right? Trace Thompson's been a disappointment, which hurts me because I personally really wanted him to succeed. James Outman is a revelation. If he can find some more consistency and eliminate some swing and miss, he might be a rookie of the year candidate. Right now, I don't think he's quite there. I mean, I love the guy, but I don't think he's rookie of the year material yet.
But he's serviceable, which is all you can ask for a rookie that gets sort of pressed into service. Like, can we throw you out there every day and can we trust you? Like, are you going to give us good ABs? Are you going to play a good center field? When they or wherever they ask him to play at, and that's what he does. So that at least you're getting that from him, which says something about this guy and his potential.
He could be hitting 225, and I wouldn't be complaining because Cody wasn't even doing that when they had him in center field. But yeah, in all seriousness, the lineup is actually fulfilling its potential. My question is there enough in the rotation right now? And I don't know. It's tough. Like I said, I'm not 100% sold that this is a team that's gonna make a lot of noise. They might hold on and take the division. I just don't know if they're healthy enough to go beyond that. Time will tell. We'll just kind of leave it at that right now. I'm not 100% sold. That's all I got.
And like I said, what does help the Dodgers is beyond Arizona and I guess San Diego. It's not exactly like you're looking at that division like, oh man, they're gonna all come for us. Like if you have to figure some things out over the course of the next couple of months, and I think the Dodgers will be okay. Like you said, I think that's seeing Bobby Miller have an outing like that. It's one of those things that if you aren't a Dodger fan, it makes you sick. Because it's like, oh, of course they can pluck another guy from the minors who's going to come in and be another Walker Buehler type for them that just kind of comes right to the majors and sort of can figure it out. But I think I have maybe a little bit more confidence than you do on the Dodgers, which is understandable because, like I said, everybody keeps telling me the Mets are going to be fine. And I'm the cat drinking coffee in a burning house meme. Like, I don't think so. So it's when it's your team, you sort of kind of, there's a natural sort of inclination of like, okay, but it's not as good as we want it to be. I don't know if I'm with you. Arizona's good. I still think they're a year away. I don't think San Diego's consistent enough. And San Francisco, unless they magically can go and find a superstar at the deadline, they're not going to be much of a bother. So I think the issue for the Dodgers is when you look at this roster, is it good enough to beat a team like Atlanta, who you ultimately will have to go through to get to a World Series? And that's where the real question is when you look at this roster.
Yeah. And I will answer that before I ask you a couple questions. As of today, right? What are we? May 24th. No, they're not. Yes, they took the last two games against the Braves. They looked pretty good doing it. But I can't see them taking 4 out of 7. I can't. Just as it's currently constructed, my pessimistic side is kicking in. I don't know. I'm not sold. And my question for you is, if you were sitting in that Mets front office and in 60 days time, I know the deadline isn't July 30th anymore, 31st, but in 60 days time, your team is 7 games above 500, 10 games above 500. You're still 4 games back of the Braves. Do you ship out one of those excess catchers? Not the kids. Do you find excess on that roster and ship it out and bring in help? Or do you hold and think you're going to get to a wild card and just see what you can do?
Yeah, no, I definitely think we're already at a place when you look at it. There's two real concerns for me, and believe it or not, it's not their offense. I know, like I said, I trust those guys, even Frankie, who hasn't quite lived up to what we wanted of him, but he has shown at times like, nope, that's why we went and got him. Like that, he in big moments, Frankie will come through. So I'm okay with the Mets offensively. My question with the Mets is two things. The guy who made the reason why we won 100 games last year got hurt during a celebration in the World Baseball Classic. We've got David Robertson trying to close games for us. That crap's not going to work. It's just not, because especially in a division where we're going to be fighting tooth and nail with these teams that know us very well in the Marlins, but yeah, even beyond the Braves and the doggone Phillies. Yeah, I am going to be crapping bricks when David Roberts is taking the mound and we're trying to close the game out with the Phillies, and they're 2-3-4s coming up, and I'm looking at Schwarber walking to the plate in a 1-run game. I'm just going to go ahead and go to the refrigerator and grab another beer, because I'm assuming we're going extras because he's about to hit 500 feet. That's what it feels like right now. So they've got to figure out a bullpen piece, and quite frankly, they got to let these kids start playing. The difference between us and the Braves is the Braves made a conscious decision a couple of years ago. Okay, we got these arms in the minors. We got Michael Harris. We got some of these. Okay, maybe maybe a year. No, let's bring them up now. They stuck Michael Harris in center field, and that guy almost became an all-star instantaneously. They brought Spencer Strider up, him and his stupid 13 size 13 feet, and his stupid mustache, and the guy's been lights out ever since they brought him up. In case you people can't tell, I hate the Braves with every fiber of my being. So I find things. Even last night, even the other night, you can't convince me that what's the name didn't do that to Will Smith on purpose. Because I don't like these guys. Like, yeah, that backswing. Who has a backswing that long? Hit a catcher in the head.
I gotta step in on that. I was trying not to say it, but there was commentary like, oh, Will Smith should be deeper in the catcher's box. He was as far back in the catcher's box as you can be. Freaking
his arm was so extended.
Did you see where he was set up in the batter's box? His right foot was outside the batter's box. Yeah. He was as far back as Smith went. He went an extra step and a half back. He was out of the back of the batter's box.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that he wasn't, it's Will Smith's fault. No, man. This guy.
Even if you weren't doing it on purpose, it's a reckless sort of behavior that we've noticed with this particular individual. But we digress. To answer your question, yes, I would like to see the Mets to use those catchers, and maybe even, as much as I have a soft spot in my heart for him because I've loved him as a player even before he was on the Mets, a guy like Eduardo Escobar, who could really be serviceable for a team that's really trying to contend or looking for a veteran presence, to maybe find a bullpen arm that we really need, because that's the biggest glaring problem with the Mets. Offensively, they're going to figure it out. Like I said, they're trying to figure out how to get these young guys at bats every day, which they really need to. They need to play these kids, because we've seen an energy shift in this lineup when they started playing these young guys that they brought up. But we need a bullpen piece, and the easiest way to do that is to ship out one or two of these catchers and maybe one of these everyday guys who are kind of causing a logjam for our young guys to play. And then whatever happens, happens. If it's meant to be this year, it's meant to be. But I don't want, like we talked about in the beginning of the year, capitalize on the fact that you have an owner that's willing to do everything to win by really putting the organization in the position to win. We got to play these young guys so they can develop, and then we can start to spend money to build around them, like the Dodgers did for years, like the Braves are starting to do. Because ultimately, that's how we're going to compete with those top teams.
Yeah. Homegrown talent trumps purchased talent any day of the year.
Don't ship it away. Like I
Yeah.
said, the Jays, I promise Jays fans, it will work out for you. If you hold on to these guys and just continue to build around them, eventually Bo Bichette and Vladdy Jr. and they will lead you to the promised land. It's tough. They're in a gauntlet of a damn division. And apparently the Orioles didn't get the memo that they didn't need to be this good this damn quick. So I've always been a person, because that's what, no matter how much people talked about how much the Dodgers spent, when you looked at what made the Dodgers so good for so long, it's they did not trade away these pieces, these young guys who then developed into everyday players.
Here, let's look at you said it, so I'm gonna say it. All right, for everybody talking about how much the Dodgers have spent and all that, right? Let's look. Will Smith, homegrown, best hitting catcher in baseball. Max Muncy, not necessarily homegrown, but they brought him in as an unknown, as a discard, and they allowed him to flourish under their system.
Yep.
And now he's, he's only hitting 211, but he's number 2 in baseball in home runs.
Yeah.
He has, I think, top 3, top 5 home runs since he's come into the major leagues. Right?
And he's one of those guys, similar to like JT was for all those years. It doesn't matter if he plays somewhere else. You don't associate him with anything other than this organization.
Exactly. And then you look at Peralta, and he's doing okay, right? But he's someone who's essentially homegrown that they're playing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Outman, we just talked about him, right? And Rojas, they had him, they shipped him away, they brought him back. He's serviceable. And then you just look at their arms in the bullpen and in the starting rotation. Mm-hmm. It's 90% homegrown.
Yeah.
So, yes, they spent a ton of money on Betts, on Freeman. They brought in JD from outside this year. They brought in Jason Hayward, right? But the core is always going to be homegrown. And you know what? Betts isn't a Red Sox turned Dodger. He's a Dodger.
Yeah.
Ready? And he's so close. He's so close. He's had those moments where now when I look at him, I don't think of him as a Brave turned Dodger. He's earned his stripes as a Dodger. Right? He's had those moments where I'm like, yeah, you're a Dodger. But still, this team took a core that they had grown through the farm system, and there's a lot still there.
Mm-hmm.
And they supplemented.
Because at the end of the day, you can talk about how much money is spent all you want to. The most important money that great organizations spend is in their scouting and development departments. That's where any of it begins. Nobody, if you tried to build an entire 25-man roster, 40-man roster out of just spending money and cherry picking, bringing people in, your payroll would be $800 million. It's not possible to do it that way. You have to start with your homegrown guys first. So, and that's what the Dodgers have done better. The Dodgers and the Yankees over the course of the last 15 years have done that better than everybody else. And I guess the Astros too. You throw them in there, those jackasses. But there are only a handful of teams that you point at and you're like, yeah, they're good. But look where it started. It started with their farm system first. So get out of here with that money talk.
You said it. And now I have to wrap this up by suppressing a little bit of vomit in myself. Because I have to say this. The Astros have less than a handful of players left from the Cheaters era.
Mm-hmm.
I should have said this when we did the AL, but you just brought them up, so I got to say it now. This team is not that same Cheaters team.
No. Even
They're
even that World Series, the guy who ultimately won that World Series had nothing to do with that previous era. That Jeremy Pena kid already has Astros fans and rest of baseball fans alike, like Carlos Correa. Who the hell's that guy? Don't even remember him.
This team is good. I want to face them in the postseason and beat them fair and square. But I can't sit here and yes, I will call the organization cheaters.
Yeah.
But that team is a legit team this year. What they're doing is legit. I'm not happy.
Yeah.
But it's the truth.
Yeah.
And you gotta speak the truth.
It's a hard pill to swallow. I have to sit there and do it with these stupid Braves every day. When I look at this team and this roster, and you look at, okay, Matt Olson is the one guy that jumps out. That's like not a guy who contributes to them every day. That wasn't from their farm. But you look around that roster, and it's like these are all homegrown guys. There's nothing you can do when an organization builds it the right way, and then they start winning. It's like, all you can do is tip your hat.
Yep. And with that, I'll tip my hat to everybody who stuck around. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We're working to drop these for you as consistently as we can. Stay tuned, because sometime in the very near future, we're going to be dropping some classic VST pods. We will be recapping all the sports, all the divisions, and just kind of let you know how they did throughout the year. You might have already been paying attention, but we're going to try to go in depth and give you some breakdowns on what's been happening. But again, if you like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get the notification bell so you know when these are coming. And every now and then, Kenny's going to grace us with a little bit of his genius.
I do my best. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Talk to y'all later.